Hey guys! So welcome to your lesson on naming ionic compounds with transition metals. We learned how to name ionic compounds last week, just the general rule. Now, I think that there was definitely some confusion last week, and that was my bad because I assigned a quiz that had ionic compounds with transition metals, and I didn't realize it. So a lot of you were having issues with the numbers and the parentheses and the Roman numerals. It's not going to count against you because we actually didn't even go over that content yet. So again, I apologize for that. But the lesson today is going to clear that up and hopefully bring all of it together. So today we're going over naming ionic compounds with transition metals as well as naming covalent compounds. So both of these will go into your interactive notebook on page 45. This first lesson you're going to be hearing from me, and then your covalent bonding lesson will be coming from Miss Bright again. So you've got two videos to watch today, but they'll both go on the same sheet in your interactive notebook on page 45. Okay, so reminders from last week's naming ionic compounds. There are 3 steps. So step 1, you give the name of the metal, which is the cation. And then step 2, you give the name of the nonmetal, which is the anion. And then you replace the ending with the suffix IDE. So we've got sodium chloride here. Sodium is Na. It's going to be the metal that donates the electron. And Cl is chlorine. It's the nonmetal that will accept that electron. So we've got sodium chloride here. Now, these steps apply to ions. Remember, all ions are a metal and a nonmetal, but these in particular apply to those that are bonded to one of the metals in the first 2 groups. Okay, so an alkali metal or an alkaline earth metal. So these 3 steps apply to the metals in the first 2 groups on the table. Now let's talk about transition metals because they're unique. Now remember, we haven't dealt with valence electrons of transition metals starting in group 3 because they can donate or have varying amounts of valence electrons depending on what's going on. So they can give up varying numbers of electrons depending on the need of the nonmetal that it's bound to, okay? So the electrons given will essentially be displayed in the name. So if it's going to be donating 2 electrons, that's where that 2 in the Roman numerals in the parentheses comes into play. So let's take a look at the steps for naming ionic compounds with a transition metal. So step 1, you determine the charges on each atom in the compound, okay? And that's going to come from basically you want to find the charge of your nonmetal first and then determine what it needs to cancel it out because ionic compounds are all neutral. So if you've got oxygen with a 2- charge, you're going to want to get a 2+ charge on your transition metal. Then you're going to write the name of the metal and include the charges as a Roman numeral in parentheses. So you've got to look at whatever charge is on your transition metal, and then that goes in Roman numerals in the parentheses after the metal. Step 3, you're going to change the ending of the second element to IDE and then put them together. Okay, so really the only thing that's changing here for the transition metals from your first 2 groups on the periodic table is that you have to include the charges from the transition metal. So let's take a look at this example. So here we've got iron and oxygen bound together, okay? So remember step 1, we want to figure out the charges. So we're going to look to oxygen first, okay? Because we know that oxygen is a nonmetal, okay? He's in group 16, so he needs 2 electrons to fill his outermost valence shell. So that means his charge is going to be 2- because he's going to take on 2 electrons. Now remember, ionic compounds are always neutral. So if oxygen has a 2- charge, we're going to want our iron to have a 2+ charge. Okay, that's how we determine the charge of the transition metal. Once we get our 2+ charge on our iron, then we can put it in parentheses. So the charge on the iron is what's going to be in Roman numerals in the parentheses. So iron has a 2+ charge, so we're going to say it's iron 2. And that 2 in Roman numerals, those are 2 capital I's. Okay, so this is where we were running into issues with our assignment last week. So we've got those 2. So we've got iron 2, and then oxygen is our last element. But again, just like before, we drop the GE in and we add the IDE. So our final name for this ionic compound is going to be iron 2 oxide. Okay, and that's that. So again, you only use the Roman numerals if it's a transition metal. Okay, if you're looking at an alkaline metal in group 1 or an earth metal in group 2, you just follow the original 3 steps that I showed you guys last week. So I hope that clears up some things for you, and maybe if you want to go back and look at that assignment and kind of see where we went wrong with that. And then go ahead and go and watch your second video from Miss B. She's going to teach you how to name covalent compounds today. And again, all these notes, both of these notes for video 1 and 2, will go on page 45 of your interactive notebook. If you guys have any questions, let me know.